In a bustling CoreTech electronics store in downtown Chicago, a tired-looking man in a wrinkled jacket was moments away from facing the worst customer service humiliation of his life. What started as a simple question about a product quickly turned into chaos when Marcus Ray, the power-hungry assistant manager, made his move to publicly destroy this nobody customer. But Thomas Wexler wasn't just another frustrated shopper. For 23 years, he operated as the CEO and founder of CoreTech Corporation, responsible for building a multi-billion-dollar empire from a single electronics shop in Milwaukee. When Marcus attempted to physically push and humiliate him in front of a store full of customers, he didn't realize he was triggering a reaction from someone trained to see everything, remember everything, and respond with surgical precision. Thomas launched a silent investigation that unleashed consequences far beyond what Marcus or his toxic team could have ever imagined. What began as a routine store visit transformed into a corporate reckoning that would be viewed by millions. After that day, the retail world would never forget the name Wexler, and Marcus Ray would never forget the customer he should have helped, instead of humiliated. Before we jump in, where are you watching from? On break at work? Scrolling late at night? Wherever you are, this story about calling out toxic managers and workplace bullies might hit closer to home than you think. If you've ever felt powerless around someone abusing their authority, stick around. This ending delivers. Hit like if you're ready for some real justice, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog rises. The CoreTech flagship store pulsed with launch day energy, its sleek displays casting electric blue shadows across the packed floor. Lines of customers snaked between towering product stands, their excited chatter mixing with the electronic hum of demonstration units. The latest smartphone release had drawn crowds since dawn, and the afternoon shift was drowning in controlled chaos. Thomas Wexler stepped through the automatic doors, wearing a wrinkled travel jacket and faded jeans, his graying beard slightly unkempt to anyone watching. He looked like another tired businessman stopping by after a long flight. His eyes, however, moved with purpose, cataloging details most would miss. The understaffed service counter, the confused elderly customer being ignored, the way certain employees huddled together, laughing at something on their phones instead of helping. He approached the main counter where a tall man with perfectly styled hair and a CoreTech polo stretched tight across his chest commanded attention. Marcus Ray's voice carried across the floor as he gestured dramatically to a young female customer, his tone sugary sweet but his eyes already scanning for his next conquest. "Excuse me," Thomas said quietly, raising his hand slightly. "I was wondering if you could." Marcus's head snapped around, his expression shifting instantly from performative charm to visible irritation. His eyes swept Thomas from head to toe. The tired jacket, the modest appearance, the patient stance of someone clearly not worth his premium time. "Whoa, hold up there, Chief," Marcus said loudly, his voice cutting through nearby conversations. Several customers turned to look. "You see this line behind me? That's where customers wait. End of the line is back there." He pointed toward the store's rear with exaggerated emphasis, as if explaining to a child. Thomas glanced at the snaking queue of at least 30 people, then back to Marcus. "I just had a quick question about end of the line." Marcus's voice rose another decibel, drawing more stares. A few customers pulled out their phones. "Look, buddy, I don't know how things work wherever you're from, but here we have something. Cold order. You want help? You wait like everyone else." Near the accessories display, Rosa Delgado looked up from restocking phone cases, her kind eyes immediately drawn to the commotion. She'd seen Marcus do this before. Target customers he deemed unworthy of his time, make a public show of their place in his kingdom. Her stomach tightened with familiar dread. "Maybe I could just..." Thomas tried once more, his voice remaining level despite the growing attention. "Are you serious right now?" Marcus threw his hands up theatrically. "Dude, look at yourself. You walk in here looking like you just rolled out of an airport, thinking you can skip past paying customers." He gestured to the line. "These people have been waiting. They matter. They have money to spend." A customer near the front shifted uncomfortably. "Damn, that's harsh," she muttered to her friend. Calvin, the security guard, glanced up from his phone screen where a YouTube video played silently. He saw the interaction, noted the growing crowd of onlookers, and deliberately looked back down. Not his problem. Store drama never paid overtime. Thomas absorbed each word, each dismissive gesture, each micro-expression of contempt, but instead of anger, something deeper settled in his chest, a profound sadness mixed with crystalline clarity. This wasn't about him. This was about every customer who'd ever stood where he stood, who'd been judged by their appearance or assumed worth. "You're right," Thomas said simply. "I'll wait in line." Marcus blinked, clearly expecting pushback or argument. The easy capitulation threw him off balance for exactly 2 seconds before his smugness returned full force. "Smart choice, my man. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to cut." He turned back to his preferred customer with renewed energy. "Now, as I was saying about our premium protection plans..." Thomas walked the length of the store to join the queue's end. Passing displays he'd personally approved, marketing slogans he'd helped craft mission statements about customer care that now felt like cruel jokes. Nobody stepped aside. Nobody offered their place. Most customers had already returned to their phones. The moment of public humiliation filed away as weekend entertainment, but Rosa watched him go. Something in his quiet dignity, the way he'd absorbed the abuse without lashing out, struck her as profoundly wrong. She'd seen entitled customers throw tantrums over smaller slights. This man had simply accepted it, taken the blame, walked away with grace. A chill ran down her spine as an impossible thought flickered through her mind. That face, those eyes, she'd seen them before. In corporate newsletters, on the company website's leadership page. No, it couldn't be. Thomas found his place at the line's end, behind a group of teenagers comparing phone features. The elderly man who'd been ignored earlier stood 2 spots ahead, checking his watch repeatedly. A mother juggled a crying toddler while trying to read product specifications. Real people with real needs, all waiting for help from employees who saw them as nothing more than sales targets or obstacles. He pulled out his own phone up, the latest CoreTech model, but a 2-year-old device he'd kept specifically because it reminded him where he'd come from. The screen showed 17 missed calls from his assistant, 12 text messages asking about his location, and 1 email marked urgent, customer complaint video gone viral, 2.3 meters views. Thomas looked up at Marcus, who was now loudly explaining to another customer why the store's return policy was absolutely firm and not his problem to solve. The man's voice carried entitlement in every syllable, ownership of space that wasn't really his, power wielded for its own sake rather than service. 30-6 hours ago, Thomas thought, remembering the video that had brought him here, Mrs. Chen, 84 years old, standing in this same store, crying because someone made her feel stupid for not understanding the technology. The line inched forward. Marcus's laughter echoed across the floor, and Thomas Wexler, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, waited at the back like everyone else, watching, learning, and preparing for a reckoning that would shake the foundations of everything he'd built. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The crowd's chatter continued, and in the growing shadows of his own store, Thomas began to see exactly how far his company had fallen from grace. Dawn light filtered through the CoreTech flagship store's windows as Rosa arrived for her opening shift, her stomach churning with anxiety she couldn't shake. She'd barely slept, haunted by yesterday's confrontation and the impossible possibility that kept circling her mind. The whispered words of that teenager echoed, "That's Thomas Wexler, the CEO." She unlocked the staff entrance and flipped on the lights, hoping the familiar routine of opening procedures might calm her nerves. But as she began her morning setup, she couldn't stop replaying every moment the quiet dignity of the man in line, Marcus's escalating cruelty, and that final ominous statement, "I'll see you tomorrow." Marcus arrived 30 minutes later, his usual swagger intact, apparently unaffected by yesterday's events. If anything, he seemed energized, like someone who'd successfully defended his territory. "Morning, Rosa," he said with false cheerfulness. "Hope you learned something yesterday about staying in your lane." Rosa focused on her inventory checklist, unwilling to engage. "See, that's the problem with people like you," Marcus continued, warming up his engine of condescension. "You think being nice to customers means letting them walk all over you, but leadership means setting boundaries, making tough choices. That loser yesterday, he needed to be put in his place." The front door chimed as early customers began filtering in. Marcus straightened his shirt and assumed his position at the main counter, ready for another day of retail dominance. At 10:47 a.m., everything changed. A black SUV pulled up outside, followed by another, and another. Men and women in professional attire began emerging, corporate executives with the unmistakable bearing of people accustomed to making important decisions. Marcus glanced out the window, mildly curious but not concerned. Corporate visits were announced weeks in advance with elaborate preparation protocols. This was probably something unrelated, maybe a neighboring business. Then the front doors opened, and Thomas Wexler walked in. Gone was yesterday's worn jacket and tired appearance. Thomas wore a crisp navy blazer over dark jeans. His bearing transformed from anonymous customer to unmistakable authority. Behind him followed his senior team, the VP of Retail Operations, the head of Human Resources, the Chief Customer Officer, and several other executives Rosa recognized from corporate communications. The store went silent as if someone had pulled a power switch. Marcus froze mid-conversation with a customer, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The man he'd humiliated, pushed, and banished from his store was walking toward him, surrounded by CoreTech's senior leadership. The customer near the front gasped, "Oh my God, that's the CEO." The whisper rippled through the store like wildfire. Phones appeared instantly, customers pivoting from shopping to several people who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation began recording. Sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary, Rosa felt her knees go weak. "I knew it. Oh God, I knew it." Thomas approached the main counter with calm, measured steps. The store's background music seemed absurdly cheerful against the electric tension filling the air. "Good morning, Marcus," Thomas said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent store. Marcus's mouth moved soundlessly, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. I don't, sir. Yesterday, I visited this store. As a customer, Thomas continued, his tone conversational but carrying the weight of absolute authority. I wanted to see our customer service in action, to understand what experience we're providing to the people who trust us with their business. The corporate team fanned out slightly, their presence turning the sales floor into an impromptu boardroom. Customers pressed closer, sensing history in the making. Marcus Ray, assistant manager, Thomas said, consulting a tablet handed to him by an executive, employed here for 18 months. Strong sales numbers. Multiple customer complaints filed, but not acted upon. Marcus's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Sir, I can't explain. Please do, Thomas said. Explain why you physically pushed a customer. Explain why you humiliated a father in front of his children. Explain why you told an elderly woman she should stick to a landline instead of helping her understand our products. The store was so quiet that the hum of electronics seemed deafening. I was having a difficult day, and you were having a difficult day, Thomas repeated. So you decided to make everyone else's day more difficult too. Thomas turned to address the gathered crowd of customers and employees. Yesterday, I stood in line in this store like any other customer. I watched an employee berate a father for his child's accident. I saw an assistant manager refuse to help customers he deemed unworthy of his time. I witnessed a culture where cruelty was rewarded and kindness was punished. His voice carried to every corner of the store, customers hanging on every word. That is not who we are. That is not who we will ever be. Thomas turned back to Marcus, who was now visibly shaking. Marcus Ray, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus stumbled backward, his carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. You can't. I have rights. This isn't fair. Fair. Thomas's voice remained calm, but steel entered his tone. Was it fair when you made Mrs. Chen cry because she needed help with technology? Was it fair when you told that father his child was poorly supervised? Was it fair when you pushed a customer who was trying to de-escalate a situation you created? Marcus looked around desperately, seeking support, allies, anyone who might validate his perspective. He found only stares of horror and disgust from customers and coworkers alike. But my sales numbers built on what? Intimidation? Manipulation? Treating customers like obstacles to your commission? Thomas shook his head. Those aren't sales numbers. They're evidence of a broken system that rewarded the wrong behaviors. Two security personnel, not Calvin, who stood nearby looking profoundly uncomfortable, approached Marcus. Sir, we need you to come with us, one said gently but firmly. As Marcus was escorted past the crowd, his performative confidence completely shattered, Thomas turned his attention to Rosa. Rosa Delgado, he said, and her heart stopped. This is it. I tried to stop him, but I worked here. I'm complicit. I'm fired too. 36 hours earlier, the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of CoreTech Tower felt arctic, despite the Chicago summer blazing beyond its floor-to-ceiling windows. Thomas sat alone at the obsidian table, his laptop open too, a video that had been shared 2.3 million times in 18 hours. The footage was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone, but the audio was crystal clear. An elderly Asian woman stood at a CoreTech service counter, her voice trembling as she explained that her granddaughter had helped her buy a phone online, but it wasn't working properly. I don't understand the technology, Mrs. Chen said apologetically. I just want to call my family. The employee behind the counter, Marcus Ray, according to the name tag visible in the frame, sighed audibly. Ma'am, if you bought it online, that's not our problem. You need to call customer service. We don't do tech support for people who can't figure out basic functions. But I thought, my granddaughter said, look, I've got paying customers waiting. If you can't work a smartphone, maybe you should stick to a landline. Marcus turned away dismissively. The camera caught Mrs. Chen's face crumpling, tears starting to flow as other customers looked away in embarrassment. A young man's voice from behind the phone said, Yo, that's messed up. That's somebody's grandmother. Thomas closed the laptop and stared at his reflection in its black screen. 23 years ago, he'd been behind a similar counter in a small electronics shop in Milwaukee, helping customers like Mrs. Chen navigate new technology with patience and respect. It's how he'd learned that retail wasn't about products, it was about people trusting you with their problems. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting. Sir, the PR team wants to issue a statement about the video. Legal suggests, cancel my afternoon, Thomas said quietly. And my evening. Actually, clear tomorrow too. Sir, Thomas stood, loosening his tie. Get me a car to the flagship store. Not the usual driver. Someone who doesn't know me. Are you sure? We could arrange a formal visit with a district manager. No announcements, no preparations, no advance team. He walked to his private closet and pulled out clothes he hadn't worn in years: jeans, a simple jacket, worn sneakers. When leaders visit with fanfare, they see theater. I need to see the truth. Present moment. Back in line, Thomas watched the truth unfold in real time. Marcus had moved on to flirting with a college-aged customer. His entire demeanor transformed into exaggerated charm. His laugh was too loud, his gestures too broad, performing masculinity for an audience that looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Trust me, beautiful. You want the premium package?" Marcus said, leaning against the counter. "I take care of customers who take care of me, if you know what I mean." The young woman shifted nervously. "I just need a phone case." "But why settle for basic when you could have premium?" Marcus's smile was predatory. "Tell you what, give me your number, and I'll make sure you get the friends and family discount." Thomas felt his jaw tighten, but forced himself to remain still. Document everything, he thought. See it all. Near the accessories wall, Rosa finished restocking and moved to help an elderly gentleman who'd been waiting for 20 minutes. She spoke quietly, her voice gentle as she explained different phone options without condescension or rush. When he struggled to hold the larger models, she suggested a lighter alternative. When he worried about cost, she pointed out genuinely useful features rather than expensive add-ons. "This one has larger buttons," she said kindly. "And see this emergency contact button right here. One touch calls your family." The man's face lit up. "That's perfect. My daughter worries about me." Thomas watched Rosa work. No performance, no audience awareness, just genuine care for a customer's needs. This, he thought, is what we're supposed to be. A commotion near the front drew his attention. A customer with mobility aids had approached the counter, but Marcus was busy with his flirtation project and waved him off without looking. 5 minutes, old timer. I'm with someone important right now." The man with the walker waited, swaying slightly. Other customers looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Calvin glanced over from his security post but remained seated, earbuds in, professionally disengaged. Rosa noticed. She abandoned her restocking and approached the waiting customer. Double quotes, "Sir, how can I help you today?" "Oh, I don't want to cause trouble," that young man said. "You're not causing any trouble. What can I do for you?" As Rosa helped the customer patiently, thoroughly, with the kind of attention Marcus reserved only for people he wanted to impress. Thomas saw the cultural divide that had grown in his company like a cancer. On one side, employees who understood that every customer deserved dignity. On the other, those who saw people as opportunities to exploit or obstacles to endure. Marcus finished with his premium customer, and immediately spotted Rosa helping someone he'd dismissed. "Rosa," his voice cracked like a whip across the store. "What did I tell you about hovering over customers? Let people browse. Stop being so needy." Rosa's cheeks flushed, but she continued helping the customer find the right accessories for his needs. "I'm just making sure he gets what he needs," she said quietly. "That's not your job. Your job is inventory and backup support. I handle customer relationships." Marcus's chest puffed out as he reclaimed his territory. Thomas felt something cold settle in his stomach. She gets scolded for helping. He gets praised for cruelty. The line moved forward slowly. Thomas observed more troubling patterns. Customers asking questions and being directed to figure it out themselves. Returns being denied without policy justification. Elderly customers being talked over and ignored. The worst part wasn't the individual incidents, it was how normalized they'd become. How staff walked past struggling customers. How other employees had learned to look away when Marcus bullied someone. His phone buzzed with another urgent message from corporate, but Thomas ignored it. The real emergency was happening right here, in his own store, under his own brand name. 2 customers who trusted his company with their hard-earned money. A teenager near him in line was lecturing and narrating her wait experience to her followers. "Y'all, I've been here for like an hour, and that manager dude is straight toxic. He's been rude to like 5 people already." This old lady asked about warranty coverage, and he literally rolled his eyes and told her to read the fine print. Thomas leaned slightly closer, catching fragments of her commentary. CoreTech talks about customer care in their commercials, but this dude acts like helping people is beneath him. 2.3 million views, Thomas thought, remembering Mrs. Chen's video. How many more videos like this exist? How many customers have we lost, not because of our products, but because of how we treat them? Marcus was now berating a young employee for taking too long with a phone setup, his voice carrying across the store like a master scolding a servant. The employee, barely out of high school, nodded repeatedly, apologizing for thoroughness that should have been praised. Thomas reached the middle of the line, and could see Rosa clearly now. She was restocking again, but her eyes kept darting to customers who needed help. Her whole body language radiating the desire to serve despite being actively discouraged from doing so. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Rosa's expression shifted something between recognition and confusion. She looked away quickly, but Thomas caught the uncertainty in her face. She knows, he realized, or suspects. The terrible irony settled over him like a weight. He'd built this company on principles of respect, service, and treating every customer like family. Those values were printed on posters throughout this very store. They were in the employee handbook Marcus had supposedly read. They were the foundation of every training program, every corporate message, every public statement Thomas had ever made. And they meant nothing. Less than nothing. They'd become camouflage for the exact opposite behavior. Marcus's laughter echoed again as he high-fived another male employee, celebrating what appeared to be a successful upselling to a customer who looked confused and overwhelmed by the premium package he'd just been convinced to buy. Thomas watched Rosa get pulled aside by Marcus, saw her shoulders slump as he spoke to her in low, sharp tones that made other customers uncomfortable to witness. Whatever he was saying, it was clear criticism for her excessive helpfulness. The breaking point, Thomas thought, is coming. But for now, he would continue to wait, continue to watch, continue to see exactly how far his company had drifted from everything he'd built it to represent. The line crept forward, and Thomas Wexler, invisible in his own store, prepared to witness just how much worse things could get. The afternoon crowd had thickened, and with it, the tension in the air. Thomas had moved closer to the front of the line, now just 8 customers away from the counter, where Marcus held court like a petty tyrant. The assistant manager's energy had shifted. What began as performative charm had curdled into barely contained aggression as the long day wore on his patience. A middle-aged woman approached from the side, clearly flustered and carrying a shopping bag from the store. "Excuse me," she said to Marcus. "I bought these headphones an hour ago, but they're not compatible with my phone. Could I possibly exchange them for ma'am?" Marcus held up his hand like a stop sign. "Returns are handled at customer service. This is sales, but the customer service desk said to come here because then they gave you wrong information. Not my problem." Marcus turned his back to her, effectively dismissing her existence. The woman stood there for a moment, bewildered, then looked around helplessly. Several customers in line shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Thomas felt his hands clench involuntarily. A young father with 2 small children approached the accessories display near Thomas's position. One of his kids, maybe for years old, was crying about a dropped toy phone. "Daddy, it's broken." "It's okay, buddy. Let's see if they have another one." The father looked around for help, eventually catching Marcus's attention. "Hey, excuse me. My son dropped this display phone, and it cracked. I'm happy to pay for it, but could someone help us figure out?" Marcus glanced over, saw the crying child in the cracked display model, and his face darkened. "Sir, you need to control your kid. This isn't a playground. If your child broke store property, that's damage you're responsible for." His voice carried across the store, drawing stares and phones. "I understand that. I'm trying to pay for it. I just need to know how much, and I need customers who can supervise their children properly." Marcus's voice had taken on a cruel edge. "Maybe next time leave the kids at home if you can't handle them." The 4-year-old's crying intensified. The father's face reddened with embarrassment and anger. "Look, accidents happen. I'm trying to make this right. Accidents don't just happen. Poor parenting happens." Marcus stepped closer, using his height advantage intimidatingly, "and poor parenting creates problems for everyone else." That's when Thomas moved. He stepped out of line, positioning himself between Marcus and the family. "There's no need to speak to him that way," Thomas said quietly, but clearly enough for surrounding customers to hear. The store seemed to pause. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones started recording. Marcus's head snapped toward Thomas, his eyes wide with disbelief and rage. "Are you kidding me right now?" Marcus's voice pitched higher. "You's a guy who couldn't figure out how lines work. You're gonna lecture me about customer service?" "I'm suggesting there might be a better way to handle this situation," Thomas replied evenly. "Oh, you're suggesting?" Marcus's laugh was harsh and mocking. He looked around at the gathering crowd, playing to his audience. "This guy, this nobody, who walks in here looking like he slept in his clothes, wants to tell me how to do my job." Rosa had appeared at the edge of the scene, her face pale with worry. Calvin remained seated but had finally removed his earbuds, sensing the escalation. "Sir," Thomas said to the father, "I'll cover the cost of the display phone. Kids have accidents." "No, no," the father protested. "I can pay for it myself. I just wanted to know the process." ENOUGH. Marcus's voice exploded across the store. "I don't know who you think you are, but this is my floor, and I decide how things get handled here." He stepped aggressively toward Thomas, close enough that his breath was hot on Thomas's face. "You want to play hero? You want to solve everyone's problems? Here's a problem for you." Marcus shoved Thomas backward with both hands, sending him stumbling into a display rack. The store went dead silent except for the child's crying. Thomas caught himself against the rack, steadied himself, and looked up at Marcus with complete calm. No anger, no retaliation, just a deep, profound sadness. "You don't need to do this," Thomas said quietly. "Oh, I think I do." Marcus's face was flushed with adrenaline and power. "See? Guys like you think you can walk into my store and disrespect my authority. But that's not how this works." A teenager near the back of the store had her phone up live. Her whispered commentary was barely audible but clearly shocked. "Y'all, this manager just put his hands on a customer. This is insane." Another teen closer to the action squinted at Thomas, his phone also recording. Something clicked in his expression, recognition mixed with disbelief. "Yo," he whispered to his friend, just loud enough for nearby customers to hear. I think that's Thomas Wexler, The CEO of CoreTech. I saw him on the news last month. The whisper rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped. In Stillwater, phones appeared everywhere. The recording teenager's eyes went wide. Rosa heard the whisper and felt her blood turn to ice. I knew it, she thought. Oh God, I knew it. Marcus, riding his adrenaline high, was oblivious to the shifting energy around him. You know what your problem is? He continued, pointing a finger inches from Thomas's face. You don't know your place. You think because you've got some gray hair and some opinions, that makes you matter. But you're nobody. You're just some tired old man who can't afford to shop anywhere better than this. Thomas absorbed every word, his expression unchanging. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath. Marcus, Rosa's voice cut through the tension. Small but brave. Please stop. Marcus spun toward her, his face contorting with fury at being interrupted during his moment of dominance. What did you say to me? I said please stop. This isn't who we're supposed to be. We, Marcus's voice cracked with incredulous rage. There is no we, Rosa. There's Mitha, assistant manager, and there's you, a part-time associate who needs to learn when to shut up and stay in her lane. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. Treating customers like this isn't right. It doesn't matter who they are or what they look like. It's not right. Marcus took a step toward Rosa, his intention unclear, but his aggression evident. That's when Thomas moved again, not aggressively, but definitively. He positioned himself between Marcus and Rosa, his stance protective but calm. She's right, Thomas said simply. The two words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, recognition of defiance, and finally, explosive anger. Get out, Marcus snarled. Get out of my store right now, or I'll have security throw you out. All eyes turned to Calvin, who was now standing but looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The security guard's training said one thing, but his instincts and the growing realization of who he might be looking at said something very different. Thomas looked around the store one final time, at the customers recording everything, at Rosa, whose quiet courage had cost her boss's favor, at the young father still comforting his crying child, at the returned merchandise counter where customers still waited for help that never come with dignity. He reached into his wallet and pulled out $200 in cash, handing it to the young father. For the phone and your trouble, Thomas said gently. I'm sorry this happened. Then he looked directly at Marcus, memorizing every detail of the man's face, his posture, his complete absence of remorse or self-awareness. I'll see you tomorrow, Thomas said quietly. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus sneered, but Thomas was already walking toward the exit, the crowd partying around him like water. The automatic doors slid open with a gentle hiss, and Thomas Wexler stepped into the Chicago afternoon, leaving behind a store full of witnesses and a phone full of viral videos that would change everything. Behind him, Marcus stood triumphant, in his kingdom of customer service nightmares, completely unaware that his reign was about to end. The teenagers were already uploading their footage. The whispers of CEO and Thomas Wexler grew louder, and Rosa stood at her accessories display, tears streaming down her face, knowing that tomorrow would bring a reckoning unlike anything Marcus could imagine. The stage was set, the truth was recorded, and justice was less than 18 hours away. Dawn light filtered through the CoreTech flagship store's windows as Rosa arrived for her opening shift, her stomach churning with anxiety she couldn't shake. She'd barely slept, haunted by yesterday's confrontation and the impossible possibility that kept circling her mind. The whispered words of that teenager echoed, "That's Thomas Wexler, the CEO." She unlocked the staff entrance and flipped on the lights, hoping the familiar routine of opening procedures might calm her nerves. But as she began her morning setup, she couldn't stop replaying every moment the quiet dignity of the man in line, Marcus's escalating cruelty, and that final ominous statement, "I'll see you tomorrow." Marcus arrived 30 minutes later, his usual swagger intact, apparently unaffected by yesterday's events. If anything, he seemed energized, like someone who'd successfully defended his territory. "Morning, Rosa," he said with false cheerfulness. "Hope you learned something yesterday about staying in your lane." Rosa focused on her inventory checklist, unwilling to engage. "See, that's the problem with people like you," Marcus continued, warming up his engine of condescension. "You think being nice to customers means letting them walk all over you. But leadership means setting boundaries, making tough choices. That loser yesterday, he needed to be put in his place." The front door chimed as early customers began filtering in. Marcus straightened his shirt and assumed his position at the main counter, ready for another day of retail dominance. At 10:47 a.m., everything changed. A black SUV pulled up outside, followed by another and another. Men and women in professional attire began emerging, corporate executives with the unmistakable bearing of people accustomed to making important decisions. Marcus glanced out the window, mildly curious but not concerned. Corporate visits were announced weeks in advance with elaborate preparation protocols. This was probably something unrelated, maybe a neighboring business. Then the front doors opened, and Thomas Wexler walked in. Gone was yesterday's worn jacket and tired appearance. Thomas wore a crisp navy blazer over dark jeans. His bearing transformed from anonymous customer to unmistakable authority. Behind him followed his senior team, the VP of Retail Operations, the head of Human Resources, the Chief Customer Officer, and several other executives Rosa recognized from corporate communications. The store went silent as if someone had pulled a power switch. Marcus froze mid-conversation with a customer, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The man he'd humiliated, pushed, and banished from his store was walking toward him surrounded by CoreTech's senior leadership. The customer near the front gasped, "Oh my God, that's the CEO." The whisper rippled through the store like wildfire. Phones appeared instantly, customers pivoting from shopping to several people who'd witnessed yesterday's confrontation began recording. Sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary, Rosa felt her knees go weak. "I knew it. Oh God, I knew it." Thomas approached the main counter with calm, measured steps. The store's background music seemed absurdly cheerful against the electric tension filling the air. "Good morning, Marcus," Thomas said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent store. Marcus's mouth moved soundlessly, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. I don't, sir. Yesterday, I visited this store. As a customer," Thomas continued, his tone conversational but carrying the weight of absolute authority, "I wanted to see our customer service in action, to understand what experience we're providing to the people who trust us with their business." The corporate team fanned out slightly, their presence turning the sales floor into an impromptu boardroom. Customers pressed closer, sensing history in the making. "Marcus Ray, assistant manager," Thomas said, consulting a tablet handed to him by an executive, "employed here for 18 months. Strong sales numbers. Multiple customer complaints filed, but not acted upon." Marcus's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "Sir, I can't explain." "Please do," Thomas said. "Explain why you physically pushed a customer. Explain why you humiliated a father in front of his children. Explain why you told an elderly woman she should stick to a landline instead of helping her understand our products." The store was so quiet that the hum of electronics seemed deafening. I was having a difficult day, and you were having a difficult day," Thomas repeated. "So you decided to make everyone else's day more difficult too." Thomas turned to address the gathered crowd of customers and employees. "Yesterday, I stood in line in this store like any other customer. I watched an employee berate a father for his child's accident. I saw an assistant manager refuse to help customers he deemed unworthy of his time. I witnessed a culture where cruelty was rewarded and kindness was punished." His voice carried to every corner of the store, customers hanging on every word. "That is not who we are. That is not who we will ever be." Thomas turned back to Marcus, who was now visibly shaking. "Marcus Ray, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus stumbled backward, his carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. "You can't. I have rights. This isn't fair." "Fair." Thomas's voice remained calm, but steel entered his tone. "Was it fair when you made Mrs. Chen cry because she needed help with technology? Was it fair when you told that father his child was poorly supervised? Was it fair when you pushed a customer who was trying to de-escalate a situation you created?" Marcus looked around desperately, seeking support, allies, anyone who might validate his perspective. He found only stares of horror and disgust from customers and coworkers alike. "But my sales numbers built on what? Intimidation? Manipulation? Treating customers like obstacles to your commission?" Thomas shook his head. "Those aren't sales numbers. They're evidence of a broken system that rewarded the wrong behaviors." Two security personnel, not Calvin, who stood nearby looking profoundly uncomfortable, approached Marcus. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one said gently but firmly. As Marcus was escorted past the crowd, his performative confidence completely shattered, Thomas turned his attention to Rosa. "Rosa Delgado," he said, and her heart stopped. "This is it. I tried to stop him, but I worked here. I'm complicit. I'm fired too. Yesterday, you were the only employee who tried to help customers with genuine care. You stood up to your supervisor when he was wrong, knowing it could cost you your job. You treated an elderly customer with patience and respect while others ignored him." Rosa's eyes filled with tears, certain she was about to be blamed for not doing more. "Rosa, effective immediately. You're promoted to store manager." The words hit her like lightning. Around the store, customers began applauding spontaneously. Several employees looked shocked, others relieved, a few worried about their own futures. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help us rebuild this store's culture. Say you'll hire and train people who understand that every customer deserves respect, regardless of what they look like or how much they spend." Rosa nodded through her tears, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. Thomas addressed the store again. "To our customers who witnessed yesterday's events, I apologize personally, and on behalf of CoreTech, this is not who we are, and we will do better." He gestured to one of his executives, who stepped forward. We're implementing immediate changes across all retail locations. New training programs focused on dignity and respect. New management structures that reward customer care, not just sales numbers. New policies that ensure every customer gets the help they deserve. A teenager near the back raised her phone. Mr. Wexler, what would you say to other companies that treat customers badly? Thomas looked directly at the camera. Leadership isn't about power over people, it's about empowering people. Real strength isn't dominating others, it's lifting them up. And sometimes the quietest person in the room sees the most. He paused, letting that sink in. What you do when no one's watching, that's who you really are. And if you're watching this video, you're not no one. You're someone who can speak up when things are wrong. Someone who can demand better. Someone who can make a difference. Another customer called out, "What about employees who stayed silent while this was happening?" Thomas looked around the store, his gaze settling briefly on Calvin, who was studying his shoes intensely. Culture change doesn't happen overnight. Some people stayed silent because they were scared. Some because they didn't know how to help. Some because they thought it wasn't their place. He paused. But now you know better. Now you can do better. The question is, will you? As the corporate team began wrapping up their impromptu town hall, a young customer approached Thomas with a phone extended. "Sir, could you sign this?" "It's my mom's phone. She's been a CoreTech customer for 10 years, and she always says customer service used to be better." Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown since entering the store. "Tell your mom that customer service is about to get a lot better, and that if she ever has a problem, she should ask for Rosa. She'll take care of her." As the crowd began to disperse and normal store operations slowly resumed, Thomas pulled Rosa aside. "The job comes with a significant raise, management training, and my personal support. But it also comes with the responsibility to make sure yesterday never happens again. Can you handle that?" Rosa straightened her shoulders, wiping away the last of her tears. "Yes, sir. I won't let you down. You already proved that yesterday. When everyone else stayed silent, you spoke up. That's not something you learn in training. Character." As Thomas and his team prepared to leave, he turned back to address the store one final time. "Remember this day. Remember that actions have consequences. That how you treat people matters. And that sometimes, the person you least expect to matter might be the one watching most closely." The automatic doors slid open, and Thomas Wexler walked back into the Chicago morning, leaving behind a transformed store and a workforce that would never forget what they'd witnessed. Behind him, Rosa stood at the main counter, no longer hiding behind displays, no longer afraid to help customers who needed her. The teenager who'd filmed everything was already uploading the footage with the caption, "Undercover CEO destroys toxic manager, faith in humanity restored." Calvin approached Rosa hesitantly, his security uniform suddenly feeling too tight. "Rosa, I mean, Manager Delgado. I should have stepped in yesterday. I knew Marcus was wrong, but Rosa looked at him with understanding rather than judgment. "Calvin, we all have moments where we choose silence over action. What matters is what we choose next time." A customer approached the counter, an elderly man with questions about warranty coverage. Rosa smiled warmly. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" As she patiently explained the options without condescension or rush, other employees watched and learned. This was how it was supposed to be. This was who they were supposed to be. Outside, Thomas sat in the SUV as his driver pulled away from the curb. His phone buzzed with notifications. The teenager's video was already approaching 100,000 views in less than an hour. His chief customer officer looked up from her own phone. "Mr. Wexler, the response is incredible. Comments are calling it leadership, goals, and how every CEO should handle problems." Thomas nodded but seemed distant, still processing everything he'd witnessed. "Schedule surprise visits to our other locations," he said quietly. "Not announced, not prepared. I want to see what's really happening in our stores. All of them, sir, all of them. And make sure Rosa gets whatever support she needs. Training, budget, staffing, flexibility, direct line to corporate, if she faces any resistance." The SUV merged into Chicago traffic, carrying a CEO who'd learned that the view from the back of the line revealed more about his company than any boardroom presentation ever could. Back in the store, Rosa's first decision as manager was to create a customer care board, a place where employees could share stories of exceptional service, where problems could be addressed quickly, and where the focus stayed on people, not just profits. The teenager's video ended with text overlay, "Like. If you'd speak up for what's right, subscribe for more stories that restore your faith in leadership." See you in the next story. By day's end, #Undercover CEO was trending nationally, with millions sharing their own stories of good and bad customer service. Thomas Wexler had sparked a movement without trying, simply by showing that true power lies not in demanding respect, but in earning it through how you treat others when you think no one important is watching.